Everyone, we're going to now call this meeting to order. All right, first we want to take a moment, have a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, next we're going to have the roll call by Madam Vice Chair.
Joe, Commissioner Austin,
Present.
Commissioner Austin Wilson, present. Commissioner Hensley,
Present.
Commissioner McMichael,
Present.
Commissioner Page, Reynolds, here. Commissioner Riley Wright, present. Commissioner Sims,
Here.
Commissioner Tolliver, present. Commissioner Robert Williamson,
Present.
Councilman Holmes, present. Councilman Johnson.
Okay, we do have a quorum. I hope that everyone received a copy of the minutes of our last meeting and had a chance to read through them. If you didn't, I'll give you a moment to scan through those minutes, and then I'll entertain a motion. Are there any corrections or changes?
Commissioner Austin, I make a motion that we receive the minutes as handed to us as read. I see no correction.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Heard the motion, you ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Motion carries. Let me just frame the next part of our meeting. We've broken this commission down into several subcommittees that have worked very hard to gather information needed for us to move forward. So the next portion of this meeting will be the presentations or updates from each of the subcommittees. And we'll start with the Public Relations Subcommittee.
We had our meeting on Monday, August 22nd, 2022, and the agenda was as follows. We did have city staff, Jawan Hollis, Denise Taylor, Evie Jones, and she also recommended a book, From Here to Equality. We had present also Councilman Michael Holmes and myself, Councilman Tyrone Johnson. Commissioners were Janet Riley, Lavelle McMichael, and Joseph Austin, our chairman, was present. Updated talking points will be presented at the One High Point Commission meeting on September 1st, 2022. We'll make a motion to adopt the talking points and begin spreading the message of the commission. Storytime tour. We need to identify the areas that we would like to tell stories. Commissioner Patrick has been asking local citizens to tell their story, and 9 have agreed. Town halls. How many town halls should we have? Southside Recreation, Deep River Recreation, Oakview Recreation were mentioned. Community forums via Zoom. We will have a Zoom and Facebook. Audience feedback and participation. Surveys, polls, questions, fact findings, and presentations. We also had an update on our marketing, such as flyers, t-shirts. One person also mentioned the QR code with survey and information on it. Give posts. The platform supports reparations. The platform would allow us to split student support and man or woman power to help with the events and create a grassroots movement. Advertising the next one High Point Commission meeting, such as churches, the Ministers Alliance. Also, we will utilize social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also, we would use word of mouth, boots to the ground in the neighborhoods, of the town hall meetings, and the story time tours in order to give citizens the ability to attend. There was a motion that was presented by Councilman Holmes to accept the talking points, present them in the one High Point Commission meeting on September 1st, 2022, which Councilman Tyrone Johnson will be our spokesperson. It was seconded by and it was agreed upon and voted with no noes. We also will have a follow-up to talk to the former mayor of the city of High Point, and that will be former Mayor Bernita Sims. Create a t-shirt design and dates and times of town halls. And that is our report, sir.
Okay, so you mentioned about the talking points. Can you go into them and kind of explain what they are, how they were generated, or how did you come about with those?
Sure. So what the Public Relations Committee did was we took the talking points that were already, or the questions that were already presented by the local NAACP, and what we did was we answered some of the questions that were a part of those sheets so that we could continue the message and stay in the same line of what has already been started with the NAACP. So we answered the question, what is the One High Point Commission? What are reparations? Why High Point? And how can High Point citizens get involved? With the mindset that we would utilize the marketing material that the NAACP has already created. To answer those questions, the commission came up with a more clear and concise sentence or two that would allow us to really portray what the commission was, and that the answer to that is the One High Point Commission is a representative body of High Point citizens brought together to identify the historic inequities endured by the Black community in High Point and provide recommendation for solutions. Then we answered the question, what are reparations? As defined by the One High Point Commission, reparations are appropriate remedies that seek to address the systemic barriers of African American advancement in the city of High Point. Why High Point? High Point has considerable history and stories that document the systemic oppression we are seeking remedies for those affected. And then we talked about how can High Point citizens get involved, and then that's when we broke down the town halls, storytime tour, and then the individual marketing that we would do. It's important to note that the town halls would be more informational and answering questions, where storytime would be those individual stories of citizens of High Point who have been affected by the complicit involvement of the city in their disenfranchisement, whether that would be economic, educational, housing, and so we've been identifying what those stories look like so that as we begin to market and talk about these talking points, that we have tangible stories from the city of High Point and how High Point citizens have been affected. We talked about a grassroots movement of marketing that would include T-shirts versus flyers, something that would really allow for conversation and allow us to really get from behind the desk and really put boots to the ground and do some door knocking in the community and have something tangible that creates a organic grassroots movement of how we can get this message across of what the commission is doing. And then also utilizing the basic social media platforms to really advertise these meetings, because we want the citizens of High Point that we're representing in the seats to be a part of these discussions that we're having in this public forum.
Thank you, Commissioner McMichaels. I'm going to check myself at this point. Commissioner Johnson or Councilman Johnson made a motion earlier to accept the talking points, and I went straight to discussion without a second. So is there a second? Second. Okay. Now, is there any other discussion? Any questions, comments, concerns on the talking points?
I think that you all have done a wonderful job, and these are some very good starting points for us to be able to take out into the community. So thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I want to add, the reason why we wanted these talking points to be relatively succinct and very direct is for message discipline. We don't want people to have to remember a paragraph every time someone asks them a question. This allows us to respond quickly, thoughtfully, with a lot of knowledge, and it's something that's easy for people to digest and memorize as they take that away. I would caution folks in the vein of message discipline, do not get ahead of the talking points. If you are asked a question about solutions, we have not arrived at that point yet. So try to stay as close to the talking points as you possibly can, because if that happens and you put a solution out there that may not ultimately be something that the city can accomplish, what you've done is put misinformation out into the streets, and that jeopardizes the work that we do. So these talking points are simple, easy to remember, and it inspires message discipline. So we wanted to make sure that everyone agreed to that, and I believe we, to the Vice Chairman's point, got a pretty good start on our messaging.
Thank you, Councilman Holmes. Are there any other concerns, questions, comments?
I have a kind of question or concern. This is Commissioner Hensley. I'm very excited about the talking point where you're involving the citizens of the community, because I think that's very, very vital and important. But my question to that is, have you established, I think someone mentioned, or maybe Commissioner Michaels mentioned about there are 9 individuals that already have been identified that will be storytellers, or?
So what we've been doing is talking to the community to see what stories are available, and then those stories haven't been vetted. We haven't heard those stories yet, so we don't know if those stories would make it to a story time or not, but we were just really starting to get the conversation going with citizens to see what stories they have. And then as a public relations committee, we've been looking at the different opportunities to categorize these stories so that we can, as we're doing the talking points, we would have an educational story, someone who's been disenfranchised by lack of educational opportunities or access, someone who has lost a home because of maybe some roads that have been put up or whatever that would look like, economic disempowerment, being denied loans or access to funding. So what we want to do is start getting the word out in public forums like this. People may decide, hey, we have a story to tell, and then our committee would then listen to those stories, vet those stories, and then find creative ways to present those stories. So what story time would look like would be an auditorium, and there may be or may not be faces. So we talked about some people don't want their stories, they don't want to be the face of their story, and so we felt like some stories without faces would be very beneficial, because to put a face with it may be detrimental to the fact that it relates to so many other people. So could we have a silhouette where people are telling the story and you hear their voice? Or could we have someone, could we use theater to really demonstrate some of the things that have happened, and really how can we portray that? And looking at so many different modalities of presenting, because as African Americans, we're embedded in culture, right? It may be music, it may be spoken word. So how do we really get this message across so that as we are doing the research, as we are looking for solutions, that the community is involved and has an interest in the topic and can get through this with some sort of support, because it's very traumatizing. It just causes a lot that we have to really address, that there is PTSD that comes up, there's mental anguish, there's emotional trauma, and how do we as a community put those things, put supports in place so that as we are presenting, that we're able to support our community and not just tear it up as we're trying to fix it up.
Thank you for that clarification. And one other question, with regards to the town hall meetings that you've identified, have you established any dates yet and the locations where they might be?
No, we have not established any dates. We have looked at potential locations and looked at how the recreation centers are strategically placed in High Point and how we could touch every part of High Point in a way that no citizen is left out. There are approximately 59,511 citizens that are African American in High Point as of the last report that was posted. And so how do we really target each side of town so that no side of town is left out and so that all voices are heard? So we're looking strategically at how we would do these town halls, where we would do them, and then how would we make it so that people are engaged and it's not just an information session, but that we're able to ask and answer questions and really get the community to, the Public Relations Committee really envisions this as a grassroots movement that galvanizes African American citizens from this entire city, from all sides of the city, north, south, east, and west, to really be able to show up and be present for a unified message and really move this agenda forward, because as much as we're trying to prove a case, the case has already been proven.
Thank you.
Okay, much of the discussion has been on the town halls, but the motion on the floor is for the talking points. So are you ready for the question? All in favor of the talking points as presented by the PR committee, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise, motion carries. Now to the town halls. To your question about dates, one of the things we established from the very beginning is that we won't move forward with any action without the approval of the entire commission. So those dates have not been determined. Now, you heard the presentation on the community events and how the PR committee is attempting to get community input. So is there a motion to accept their, what they presented as far as the community events?
I'll make a motion. This is Commissioner Hensley, make a motion to accept what's been presented thus far from the Public Relations Committee.
I second this motion.
Okay, it's been properly moved and second. Is there any further discussion on that? Ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Motion carries. Now you can set up your dates and take a look at what those actually look like. I've had a lot of conversation with our facilitators. This is a good project to get them involved as far as the town halls and all go. So utilize their expertise in assisting with that, plus others on the commission that want to step in and also assist, which these events are events that all of us will take part in. So, and to those that are joining us tonight, we are counting on you all and those that are listening to get this message out and to show up. We truly want this to be a community effort. So in order for that to happen, we have to have the community at the table. So thank you very much for that report. Now we'll move on to research.
Okay, meeting minutes were provided to all the commission members. At this time, if you want to follow along with our meeting minutes, you can. Good evening, everyone. As Vice Chair, I come before you tonight to present on behalf of the Research Committee our regular scheduled monthly reports. As follows, we have had the opportunity to meet twice since our last at-large meeting on August the 4th. Our August the 11th calendar meeting was canceled due to several conflicts with members, COVID. We reconvened on August the 18th at 6:00 p.m. where we discussed the following. The members present at August the 18th meeting were myself, Vice Chair Austin Wilson, Commissioner Robert Williamson, Commissioner Hensley, Commissioner Dawn Austin Page, Commissioner Bridget Tolliver, City Council Coordinator, Mr. Hollis, and City Council Staffer, Ms. Jones. There were no absent members. We had two guest presenters. Commissioner Dawn Austin Page presented in person, and Naheem Way was virtual. Vice Chair Austin Wilson called the meeting to order at approximately 6:14. Vice Chair Austin Wilson called to action relinquishing my subcommittee duties to Chair Hensley, Commissioner Hensley. Motion was accepted by all, and Vice Chair Austin Wilson called to action a new recorder for our subcommittee, which Commissioner Bridget Tolliver accepted the role of the meeting recorder, and she began that evening. Our subcommittee voted on new dates to be on the calendar for our upcoming meetings. They were scheduled out to be August the 25th at 6 p.m. and September the 8th at 6 p.m. All are welcome to attend our September the 8th at 6 p.m. meeting. Commissioner Charles Hensley expressed his need for all commissioners to receive a copy of the California Task Force interim report, the California Task Force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. Commissioner Hensley, we all received a copy, all subcommittee leads have received a copy currently of the California report. I, sitting in the role of chair of the subcommittee research, delegated it out, signed it out to one of our subcommittee members. Commissioner Hensley was the first to take the copy of the report and was to return it on September the 15th with input on his findings. Commissioner Robert Williamson shared his findings of a representative of the North Carolina State Archives who may be able to present information to the group. Commissioner Robert Williamson shared he would like to work on a timetable for the budget and have more understanding of where we stand with the budget. Commissioner Dawn Austin Page suggests a representative of each subcommittee present information to each other. So being more transparent, working together is what that refers to. As far as there may be a person that we interview, vet in research that the budget committee could utilize or that PR could utilize. There may be some things that come to us that we feel could be moved around or information just shared, repetitive information shared, knowledge that we all could be able to gain from. Commissioner Hensley and Commissioner Sims were to contact one another on Zoom to discuss cost budgets before our next meeting on August the 25th. Commissioner Austin Wilson Page presented a YouTube video highlighting the need for specificity when selecting which members of the African American community would be eligible for reparations. The speakers were Erwin Chimorinsky, who is the Dean of the UC Berkeley School of Law, and Naheem Way, which is the president of the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. The topics of importance were OMB, Directive, Race and Ethnic Standards of May 12, 1977, disparities in medical health in North Carolina for African Americans, Freedmen School in High Point in 1868, disparities in treatment of African Americans during COVID, and the disparities of treatment in African American farmers during COVID as well. Commissioner Hensley calls motion to adopt Friedman concept when determining eligibility for recipients of reparations. All members voted yes. Vice Chair Austin Wilson, motion for the meeting to adjourn. These minutes were prepared by Commissioner Bridget Tolliver. Our next commission meeting that I have to report on was on Thursday, August the 25th. At this particular meeting, the members present were Chair Alston, Vice Chair Austin Wilson, Commissioner Williamson, Commissioner Hensley, Commissioner Austin Page, Commissioner Tolliver, City Council Coordinator, Mr. Hollis, and City Council Staffer, Ms. Jones. There were no members absent. Commissioner Hensley called the meeting to order at approximately 6:03. Commissioner Williamson followed up with an update information regarding the NC archives. Residents of North Carolina must request documents. Once documents are requested, the appropriate fee is provided for the requester. Timeline to get documentation undetermined. So that sort of told us that individuals would have to go after that archive search, and maybe not as an at-large group. But we will continue to have discussions about that as well. Commissioner Hensley returned the California interim report copy. Commissioner Hensley actually is a tactical individual and wanted to make his own notes and suggestions in the book. So he actually went and purchased his own copy. The average cost, if any commissioner is interested in writing in the book and wanting a book for themselves, is $150. Commissioner Hensley did submit his receipt just to show the other commissioners what that would be. He was able to be blessed to get a discount at $90-some. But if anyone is interested in that process, you may want to speak to Commissioner Hensley about that. Moving on with the meetings. Commissioner Hensley motioned to approve minutes of last subcommittee meeting on August the 18th. Minutes were approved. Commissioner Hensley reviewed presenter Naheem Way's presentation and followed up with Mr. Way. Vice Chair Austin Wilson suggests having Mr. Way present briefly to the entire committee to explain the Friedman concept and its importance. Commissioner Hensley to reach out to Mr. Way to see if he can present to the whole committee or a proxy if available. Vice Chair Austin Wilson, shared genealogist Lamar Deloach is available to present to subcommittee on migration patterns. Commissioner Tolliver shared Professor Omar Ali, who is available to present to the subcommittee on the history of the effects of racism in North Carolina. Professor Omar Ali is a professor at University at Greensboro, North Carolina. Commissioner Austin Page suggests genealogist Bordeaux, but his name, is it Jason? Yes. Jason Bordeaux, to assist in subcommittee on the High Point Commerce. Bordeaux may be able to submit a report instead of speaking. His cost would be around $85 per hour. Commissioner Austin Page suggests getting a report from all presenters if possible. So that would be our way of gauging
Recording in progress.
I guess the bulk of the information that we're requesting. So it would give us benchmarks. It would give us a way to add the addition and have things for us to be able to present in the end report. Okay.
While we have this brief pause, Mrs. Chairman Austin, let the record show that Commissioner Austin Page is present.
Currently, our action items for the subcommittee research, we are working on, but not limited to, establishing legal aid, establishing historians, economists, and genealogists. We are working diligent to secure presenters for the month of September and October. So there is a lot of work for us to continue to do. And with that said and reviewed, I would like to hear any closing statements from our chair, Commissioner Hensley, that he may have. And after he gives his closing statements to our reports, if anyone has any questions or concerns that they may want to voice to the subcommittee as a whole, the members, we'd love to hear from you all. And also, the next voice after Commissioner Hensley, we will hear from Commissioner Dawn Alston Page, and she will be introducing our guest speakers for tonight, and will give us and provide us with a brief bio of the guest presenters. I yield to Commissioner Hensley.
Thank you. Just as a brief follow-up to the note in reference to where I was to reach out to Mr. Way, I did reach out to him on actually several occasions between now and today, actually, and just to confirm that, one, he will be available to present to the body of the commissioners what he presented to us at our subcommittee meeting, to share with the entire body the position and the perspective by which he believes our committee or our commission should approach this from a lineage-based perspective. And he was in agreement to that, and as of this evening, he is prepared to present a virtual presentation on behalf of our request for him to be present tonight. And just from my perspective, I think his presentation is extremely pertinent to our efforts. It provides a wealth of information that I was not privy to until I heard his presentation, and I think it would be valuable for this body as well as the community to understand why it's important from a legal perspective to approach our effort from a lineage-based philosophy rather than a race-based philosophy. And I won't say too much more about that because he will provide the details and the rationale as to why that approach is more amenable to the state of the union that we address now. So I will yield back to Vice Chair Austin.
One of the things we need to discuss before Commissioner Page comes up is we need to discuss our one-day retreat. We priorly discussed in our last meeting, we discussed a weekend retreat, or a weekend way that we could have a work session where we could have presenters come in, we could have breakout sessions. Well, realistically, as Chair and I discussed, and the facilitators, we feel in order to get really the bang for us now and to be able to go ahead and schedule it, we don't have a budget that fits those needs quite yet. So why don't we just do a one day and maybe ask the city if they could give us the theater, which we thought would be a great place for presenters to come. And the public, people of the public, it's a public open meeting, so the public can come. But it would give us a way to have breakout sessions. It'll give us a way to fellowship, get to know one another, but also hit on key presenters that day, which would probably be presenters from legal aid, presenters from genealogy, presenters from economists, and the presenters from the historian. So we think that would be really advantageous for us as a group to be able to get together. So what we need to do in this particular meeting is either put it in the parking lot and we come back with different dates. We all get together and come up with some dates that are available for us, whether it's the end of September or the first week of October, or we discuss it tonight and we vote on it and we come up with a date. I'll leave that up to the at-large. I yield the floor to any discussion about that.
This is Commissioner Hensley. I would say let's try to put it to a vote tonight and just have it as an action item so we won't delay any much further than because time is at the essence.
Of the essence, okay.
So I would say we put it to a vote.
And this is Chairman Austin. I agree with that. We're coming up on the 6-month mark in November that the commission has been together. And I think we really that would be a good time for us to get together and pull together any information that we and make determinations of directions we're gonna move, going forward. It also will give us an opportunity for those commissioners that have been working in their various subcommittees to come together and kind of work with some other folks during the breakout sessions. So I think it's a win-win, and maybe come back at a later time, because I see a weekend coming. We will need one, but it's too early to do that right now. So, kind of breaking from where we actually are right now, can I entertain a motion to start pulling together the one-day workshop?
A second.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved in second. Is there any other discussion on that?
Can we look at September the 22nd and September the 29th? They're on Thursdays. We already say we're available on a Thursday. Maybe that be our day that we have a working session? Is it Thursday all day? Maybe from 9 to 5 or however that looks?
So let's move forward with the vote on actually doing it, and then we can coordinate the dates and times with the city at that point.
And I'm not thinking, we have to coordinate with the presenters as well.
That's right.
So
That's
we're
right.
working on someone else's calendars too, so.
Okay. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Motion carries. We now have a one-day session. All right, I yield back to Madam Vice Chair and this research subcommittee.
And I yield to Commissioner Austin Page.
I just wanted to ask if the recording is going, if the public is able to access the meeting via the link at this time.
It is live. I asked that question when I came in today. It is live on YouTube, and they have access to it that way. Anyone that has a link is a presenter. Anyone that wants to go on just to be observe and be a part of it is YouTube Live, if I'm not mistaken. Okay,
Because I wasn't letting, I was trying to get in, and I wasn't letting, so
okay.
it's curious.
And I did request tonight that all of the commission members be provided the link, and that is just as a security measure to say if they're not actually in their seat, maybe they could join by that if need be. So maybe we can revisit that conversation.
Yeah, if we could just make it easier for people to
participate.
even if they're not here. I would think that link would be open to the public, and I guess I was under the presumption that was how it was done.
Okay. Would you like to start the presentation on the bio, introducing the presenters and starting the bios?
So I'm assuming that our guest is on the,
He is in queue.
okay, so we're gonna start. So good evening, everyone. Thank you. This is Commissioner Dawn Alston Page, and I want to happily introduce our first presenter. This is Dean Erwin Chimorinsky. He is a dean at the Berkeley School of Law. Erwin Chimorinsky became the 13th Dean of Berkeley Law on July 1st, 2017, when he joined the faculty as the Jesse H. Chopper Distinguished Professor of Law. Prior to assuming this position from 2008 to 2017, he was the founding Dean and Distinguished Professor of Law and Raymond Creek Professor of Amendment Law at the University of California, Irvine School of Law. Before that, he was the Alston and Byrd Professor of Law and Political Science at Duke University from 2004 to 2008. And from 1983 to 2004 was a professor at the University of Southern California Law School, including as the Sidney M. Ermis Professor of the Public Interest Law, Legal Ethics, and Political Science. From 1980 to 1983, he was an assistant professor at DePaul College of Law. He is the author of 14 books, including leading case books and treatises about constitutional law, criminal procedure and federal jurisdiction. He is also the author of more than 200 law review articles. He is a contributing writer to the opinion section of the Los Angeles Times, and writes regular columns for Sacramento Bee and the ABA Journal and the Daily Journal, and frequent op-eds in newspapers across the country. And in 2016, he was named a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In 2017, National Jurist magazine named Dean Chimorinsky as the most influential person in legal education in the United States. In January 2021, he was named president-elect of the Association of American Law Schools. So with that, Dean Erwin Chimorinsky, we have a short clip that we'd like to show you about the constitutionality of race as a basis for reparations.
American legal scholar known for his studies of United States constitutional law and federal civil procedure. He served as the founding dean of the University of California, Irvine.
Can you fast forward that a little bit?
2008
She just really gave the bio.
2017,
Okay.
and is currently the dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. A study of legal publications between 2016 and 2020 found Chimorinsky to be the most frequently cited American legal scholar. Chimorinsky was named a Fellow of the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences in 2016. The National Jurist magazine named him the most influential person in legal education in the United States in 2017. And in 2021, Chimorinsky was named president-elect of the Association of American Law Schools. Very, very happy to have Dean Chimorinsky here with us. And without further ado, Dean Chimorinsky, you may start your expert testimony when you're ready. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. My honor to be able to testify before you. I'm here to address one question: how to structure reparations in the way most likely to be upheld by the courts. My conclusion is that reparation is most likely to be upheld by the courts if it's structured in a race-neutral fashion. That is, it's most likely to be upheld by the courts if reparations are for those who were descendants of slaves rather than for all who are Black. In the United States, under current constitutional law, and in California under Proposition 209, laws that give a preference on the basis of race are either inherently suspect or perhaps per se illegal. And therefore the question is, how can reparations be structured in a way that would get through judicial review? Let me talk about two sources of law, the California Constitution and then the United States Constitution, to explain why I've come to this conclusion, then briefly respond to some of the questions that you might have about the position I'm taking, and then answer anything that you want to ask of me. The first source of law that you need to focus on is the California Constitution, what was commonly referred to as Proposition 209. It was called the California Civil Rights Initiative. It says that the state of California and all of its political subdivisions cannot discriminate or give preference on the basis of race in education, employment, or contracting. And so if reparations are given on the basis of race, that anyone who meets the definition of being Black is entitled to reparations because all have suffered from the legacy of slavery, I don't think it could survive a challenge under Proposition 209. Now, Proposition 209 is limited to education, contracting, and employment. And if the reparations were not in those areas, then Proposition 209 wouldn't be a problem. But if it's in education, or if it is in contracting, or if it is employment, then anything that is deemed as a preference on the basis of race is per se impermissible. This is different than what I'll talk about in a moment, the United States Constitution, where there is the possibility of racial preferences being constitutional. Under the California Constitution, they're not. There's relatively little case law about Proposition 209, but that which exists broadly defines what is preference. It would be hard to imagine that there'd be a reparation system that was racially defined that wouldn't run afoul of this. Now, as I said in my introduction, if this were defined as a benefit for those who are descendants of slaves, it would certainly largely overlap with race, but it would not entirely overlap with race. There are blacks who are not descendants of slaves. There's a very small population that were enslaved that wouldn't be blacks. So I think there'd be a strong argument based on Proposition 209 that limiting reparations to those who descendants of slaves would not run afoul of Prop 209, whereas if this is defined in a race-based manner, then I think Proposition 209 would be a substantial problem. But assume that Proposition 209 wasn't a problem. Imagine this wasn't reparation about education, contracting, and employment, in which case it would be entirely outside the scope of Proposition 209. There is still the United States Constitution. And the Supreme Court has said now, for over 30 years, that racial classifications benefiting minorities, just like racial classifications that disadvantage minorities, are highly suspect. The Supreme Court has said that racial classifications benefiting minorities, like those disadvantaging minorities, must meet strict scrutiny. As I'm sure the Commission knows, strict scrutiny means that the government action has to be necessary to achieve a compelling government purpose. And the Supreme Court has been very restrictive as to what counts as a compelling purpose in this context. Quite relevant to your Commission, the Supreme Court has said that remedying the history of past discrimination is not a compelling purpose sufficient to justify remedial action. There was a Supreme Court case, Wygant versus Jackson Board of Education. The Jackson, Michigan school system had recently hired a number of black teachers when it needed to have layoffs. It decided to fire white teachers with more seniority. Their argument was that this was to remedy a long history of race discrimination. They also said how important it was to provide role models for black children in the schools. The Supreme Court declared this unconstitutional. And the court's opinion was explicit that there cannot be preferences based on race on the grounds of remedying the history of discrimination. Or there's the case J. Croson versus City of Richmond. Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the old Confederacy, set aside 30% of its public works monies for minority-owned businesses. They did so because even though at that time Richmond was a city that was more than 50% black, racial minorities and blacks were receiving only about 1% of public works contracts. But the Supreme Court declared this unconstitutional, and the court said the long history of race discrimination, including in Richmond, Virginia, didn't justify the preference that was given on the basis of race. There is, as of now, only one area where the United States Supreme Court has allowed race-conscious remedies, and that's in the area of higher education. In a series of cases, the Supreme Court has said that college universities have a compelling interest in having a diverse student body, that college universities may use race as one factor among many in admissions decisions to enhance diversity to benefit minorities. This was initially articulated by Justice Lewis Powell in an opinion in Regents, University of California versus Bakke in 1978. It was reaffirmed by the Supreme Court in 2003 in Grutter versus Bollinger, and then reaffirmed most frequently and recently in 2016 in Fisher versus Texas at Austin. But in the Fisher litigation, the Supreme Court made clear that college universities could use race as a factor in admission decisions only if they could prove there was no other way to achieve diversity. Now, it's worth noting that the states can do what would be thought of as protecting more rights than the U.S. Constitution. And so California can prohibit affirmative action even though it would be permissible under the U.S. Constitution. That's exactly what Proposition 209 does. But even as to this one area where racial classifications benefit minority have been allowed, the law, I think, is about to change. The Supreme Court has granted review in 2 cases for next October, one involving Harvard University and one involving the University of North Carolina. And the issue in those 2 cases is whether the Supreme Court is going to overrule the earlier decisions allowing affirmative action. Why 2 cases? Well, the Constitution applies only to the government, private activities don't have to comply with the Constitution. Harvard is a private university. But Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act applies to entities that receive federal funds, including private entities. Harvard obviously receives federal funds. So the issue in the Harvard case is whether or not race-conscious affirmative action in admissions violates Title VI. In the University of North Carolina case is whether it violates equal protection. It is impossible to count 5 votes on the current Supreme Court that would uphold the Harvard and the North Carolina affirmative action programs. Chief Justice John Roberts been outspoken in his opposition to all forms of affirmative action. In Parents Involved in Community Schools for Seattle Schools No. 1, 2007, he explicitly took the position that the Constitution requires that the government be colorblind. Justice Thomas and Alito have taken the position, and with 3 additional conservative justices, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, hard to imagine the Supreme Court doing anything but reversing those earlier decisions. Well, what does that mean in the context of the discussion of reparations? If reparations are framed in a race-based manner, then they would have to meet strict scrutiny, necessary to achieve a compelling purpose. And remember, the Supreme Court has said remedying a history of discrimination is not regarded by the court as a compelling government purpose. And so I think it would be very hard to convince this Supreme Court or lower courts following Supreme Court precedent that a race-based reparation program would be constitutional. I think the best hope with regard to the Supreme Court is a program that is facially race neutral, that being framed in terms of a benefit for descendants of slaves would be much more likely to be upheld. There are precedents for reparations, as this commission well knows. For example, there was the reparations provided to those who had been in Japanese internment camps. But it's important to note that that was based on people who had suffered a particular injury, and they were each given $20,000 in an apology during the Reagan administration. It wasn't anyone who was of a particular race. I think it would be hard to convince this court that a race-based program, net strict scrutiny, was constitutional. On the other hand, what's more encouraging to me, that I cannot think of any instance where the Supreme Court has struck down a race-neutral law on the ground that it has a benefit or even a targeted benefit for minorities. As an example, some states have adopted admissions programs where they take top 10% of classes across the state. And this was undoubtedly adopted to benefit minorities, and it had the effect of benefiting minorities. And yet the Supreme Court, at least called dicta, has indicated that would be constitutional, even though the purpose, the effect would be to benefit minorities. So I come to you as the messenger. I am not defending the law as set out by the Supreme Court. It is certainly not the law as I would want it to be. And I completely understand the benefits with regard to praising reparations and framing it in terms of those who are Black. I am simply addressing the question, what is most likely to be held by the courts? Let me just respond to 3 things that might be in mind, and then I'll take your questions. One thing that might be in mind is there is a tremendous difficulty in proving that someone is a descendant of slaves. This will be very under-inclusive in that way. As this commission knows so well, records are incomplete. And so the cost of what I'm suggesting is that many who are deserving would not get benefits. And I think if you go in the direction of providing that those who are descendants of slaves would get reparations, how to deal with the incomplete records and the lack of documentation becomes very important. A second concern is, as articulated by the prior speaker, all Blacks in this country have suffered from the legacy of slavery. All should therefore be able to benefit from reparations. I think that is a compelling argument, but I don't think the United States Supreme Court would find that to be a compelling argument. If you look at the case I mentioned, where the court says remedying the past history of discrimination is not a compelling interest. I don't see a way of persuading the current Supreme Court, that matter the lower courts of that. And a final criticism of what I'm suggesting is that there's still the purpose of benefiting blacks. The effect is still to benefit blacks. Might a court not strike it down on that basis? And yes, I think that's a risk, even of a reparations law that's framed in terms of benefiting descendants of slaves. But I think it is far more likely to be upheld than a law that is framed just in terms of race. So again, wanted to address just one question for you: how to frame reparations in the way most likely to be upheld by the courts. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Chimorinsky, for your informative expert testimony. I would like to now recognize our task force members in the event that they have any questions, comments for Dean Chimorinsky. Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, you are recognized.
And thank you. And I missed some of it because I had to step away from a second. But Mr. Chimorinsky, as you probably heard from several other people about descendants of slaves, you probably could hear the pain, and probably the pain of our ancestors who were enslaved, and the harm that was done to them. When you hear their ancestors speak of it, you probably could hear the pain. And I'm thinking of, in a context of lawsuits.
Thank you. We're going to cut that short, and you can actually go, this is Commissioner Alston Page, you can actually go to the Research Subcommittee link to see the full clip of that, which is only a few minutes more, but it was questions from, that is the California Reparations Task Force. As I said, you can see it there. I'm really happy to state that we do have a live guest that is going to add on to what we heard from Dean Chimorinsky, and I just wanted to point out what the point he is making. First of all, the situation that we're faced with is that laws have been changed such that we cannot fix race-based harm with race-specific programs or fixes, contrary to, which is obviously counterintuitive, but that's what we're dealing with. And I'll point to what is happening with the black farmers, where even though you had black farmers, you had socially disadvantaged, you had other various groups or classes named, opposition zeroed in on the term black and basically prevented black farmers from getting any kind of benefit from the debt relief program. So Tulsa is another example of why that hasn't really gotten anywhere, and only recently is making headway because they are now doing a harms-based and lineage-based claim, which is obviously a much stronger position. So with that, I want to just give you an introduction. Mr. Naeem Way, his organization has been in existence for about 10 years. Naeem Way has authored 7 books ranging from American Civics, Racial Classification System, and along with, but most importantly, Freedmen History. Naeem is the co-founder of the nonprofit United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen and Be the Power Political Action Movement. Naeem is a natural leader and self-taught academic with a background in community work, social and political advocacy, as well as youth engagement. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Way. Welcome to our commission. Thank you.
Hello, greetings to you all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you for having me. Honors to the High Point Commission. I want to give a presentation. It's a condensed form of the presentation that I normally give because of the time restrictions, but I'm going to do my best to get through it in a timely manner. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I want to do. Let us start from the beginning, slideshow. Okay, so this is where I would like to start this from. We heard Chimorinsky speak to the issue of why race-based legislation, race-based laws will in fact get shot down by the Supreme Court. Commissioner Alston has spoke to the farmers. I have some of that in my presentation. I don't know if I'll be able to get to that, but what I want to do is I would like to start with what we have here. Now, please tell me which screen can you see? Do you see like a full screen, or do you see a split screen with two windows?
Split screen.
Okay, I don't know how to fix that. Let me just stop sharing for 1 second. Let me stop sharing for 1 second. See if I can pull that back up. I think this should be it. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to start here. This is based on the congressional record in the Senate, S1-0499-S10500, and it is speaking about affirmative action and why affirmative action shouldn't be basically eliminated as a law. And it says, the most important examples involve the Freedmen's Bureau, created in 1865 as a means of providing special benefits and assistance for African Americans. The opponents of the Freedmen's Bureau Acts attacked the Bureau on the ground that it would apply to members of only one race. The response was that discrimination was justified in the interest of equality. Quote, "We need a Freedmen's Bureau," said one supporter, "not because these people are Negroes, but because they are men who have been for generations despoiled their rights." I want you to think about what Chimorinsky said when he spoke to race-based policies being struck down, but race-neutral policies almost always being upheld by the Supreme Court. By identifying our lineage via our freedman status, we eliminate that racial standard that the Supreme Court checks for to see if it will in fact terminate any provision, as we see with the black farmers. So next, I want to bring you to Federal Directive 15. This was adopted May 12, 1977, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna try to get through this because of time, but I'm gonna try to be as concise as possible. It says that these classifications should not be interpreted as being scientific or anthropological in nature. These are the race and ethnic standards for federal statistics and administrative reporting. Now, this is very, very vital because they're not using science or anthropology to determine a person's race. What they are using, however, are basic socio-political constructs, some may say masked in ethnic backgrounds. Now, as you notice, we see there are 5 categories: American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian or Pacific Islander, Black, Hispanic, and white. I have Japan highlighted there because there are only 2 racial classifications in this group, and that is black and white. And the reason why I have Japan highlighted there, as Professor Chimorinsky noted, the Japanese Americans did receive reparations for the harms that they received by being placed in internment camps during the war. But notice, it says black. A person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. So already, according to the definitions, black people, as we're called, are kind of in a trick bag. No other classification has, as you all can see, has this particular wording, right? Hispanic, for instance, says a person of Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Central or South American, or other Spanish culture or origin, regardless of race. white, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. But notice it doesn't say black racial groups or white racial groups, for white, or Spanish or Hispanic racial groups for Hispanics, Asian or Pacific Islanders, et cetera, et cetera. Only we are confined to that specific language. On the Census Bureau website, we see that the term black or African American is truly seen as one thing, right? A person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. And so even the term African American becomes sort of tricky because we know that it was a term that was given to our people for an ethnic identifier to distinguish us from other groups. But since 1988, when Reverend Jesse Jackson and several others had got this term legally coined, African American also extends to other groups, whether they be from the Caribbean or whether they be from the mainland continent of Africa. What you are looking here at is an ancestry map. This can be found on Wikipedia. And what you see in the purple is African Americans. You see that we are situated in the South, and what it shows is all of the different groups and where they are situated at. So this country knows how to identify us by our specific lineage, hence the word ancestry. On this same wiki link, we can see that black or African Americans, as we're called, we are the second largest ethnic group in the country. The only group larger than ours is the Germans, according to this list. Some believe that we are actually the largest ethnic group in the country. But when we get into the socio-political construct of race, then we drop down to the third largest ethnic group in the country behind whites and Hispanics. To contrast, right, when you look at, this is the top 30. I have the top 19 in the screenshot. If you look at number 17, you see West Indian. West Indians are 0.92% of the population in this country. There are 3 million of them, and yet they are also considered black and African American. So when Chimorinsky says, there may be some difficulty trying to find out who exactly is black or a descendant of slave, we feel that we have solved that problem by resurrecting the status that was given to our ancestors after slavery, which is American freedmen. Now, we define American freedmen as the legal political status inherited by the posterity of the 4 million freedmen and women who were emancipated nationally in 1865 by way of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It also includes the progeny of those historically identified as Negroes, blacks, or coloreds of African descent who gained freedom from slavery prior to 1865 by way of either the Emancipation Proclamation, being contrabands under the Confiscation Acts, being fugitives in accordance to Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, as well as the Fugitive Slave Acts, freedom suits, gradual abolition or emancipation in northern states, purchasing their own freedom, manumission by owners, or enlisting and fighting for the patriots during the American Revolution. This definition is important in our understanding of why lineage-based is vital to our push for reparations. We use the term descendants of emancipated persons as opposed to descendants of slaves. Why? Because when you look at the slave registries, right, like I have up on the screen, this is the United States Census Slave Schedule from 1850 from Charleston County, Charleston, South Carolina. So what you notice are several names, and these are the names of the slave masters. Slaves are not listed by name on most and probably almost all slave schedules. What you see underneath these names are blank spaces. But to the right, you see the names of the slaves that these owners held. You see under Aaron Way, which is my last name, you see there was one slave male, 21, one slave at the age of 7, female, male 5, male 2, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why we may have difficulty when trying to do a lineage trace going back to slavery, and why we feel that using the term freedman is a better option or a more viable option. This is my own personal search where I've located one of my ancestors where? On the Freedmen's Bureau's records. This is from Ridgeville, South Carolina in 1868, roll 99, and you see right there my ancestor, Andrew Way. I've actually been able to locate several ancestors on the Freedmen's Bureau's roll. Recently, Justice Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court Second Amendment rights case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Bruin, was able to couch his opinion in the fact that freedmen, the American freedmen, our ancestors, were able, because of their newfound status, able to carry firearms to protect themselves. I'm not going to belabor any of these points. I'm just going to try to keep it moving so I can get through as much of this as possible. Freedmen has been, and really technically still is, codified in the United States Code. It is just omitted. And I think the actions that we take here in High Point, North Carolina, along with what was done in California, will lead us to getting our status legally readmitted into the United States Code. Speaking of California, we see that according to their state's government code, they have added, as we see in the highlighted section, American freedmen, which means persons who gained freedom from slavery in the United States or their descendants, into their code so that they can disaggregate our people, meaning those of us who can trace our ancestry back to an emancipated person from, let's say, a Nigerian, Liberian, et cetera, et cetera. Chimorinsky spoke about schools and, you know, why we, there was a case, I think he said in North Carolina, where they tried to hire a bunch of black teachers so that black students could have black role models, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the white teachers sued and said, you know, this is race inclusive and really race exclusive, and the Supreme Court struck it down. Well, once upon a time, if I can use that term, we had our own freedmen schools, and we were taught in the most part by freedmen teachers. And bringing back this freedman status to our people, we can re-implement this very thing, and we could get to teaching our people again and giving them the proper role models so that we are not lagging in education. I looked at some of the numbers in High Point, North Carolina. I'm obviously not prepared to give the full testimony on High Point at the moment, but I looked at several different factors, pregnancy, deaths, infant mortality rates, deaths due to pregnancy complications, maternal mortality, et cetera. So I don't know where I'm at on time, so y'all can stop me, or I could just run through a couple of more slides if you like.
You're fine, Mr. Way.
Okay, so what I want to do, and I'm going to be real quick with some of this, and I'm trying to speed through some of it, right? But I want to show, during the COVID relief packages, we've seen that the Senate passed investment in Native programs of $31 billion. I'm not going to read all of these, but you see how this $31 billion were broken down into different services for not just Native Americans, but also Hawaiians, right? I thought Hawaiians were citizens of you know, the United States of America, but that's neither here nor there. When farmers, as I'm going to show in a few minutes, tried to do the same thing, they were rejected. So these are just some more of the numbers. that show how this money was broken up. I spoke of schools, and yet $1.1 billion went into Native education programs, including the Bureau of Indian Education and schools, tribal education agencies, tribal colleges and universities, Native Hawaiian education programs, and Alaskan Native education programs. Again, we bring up the relief payments to black farmers was stalled by white conservative groups that were in Trump's administration when Biden tried to pass relief for our freedmen farmers. And like I said, I'm just gonna run through some of this. It says this suit takes issue with sections 1005 and 1006 of the American Rescue Plan enacted in March that uses language in the 1990 Farm Bill to define quote unquote socially disadvantaged agricultural producers as people quote subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice because of their identity as a member of a group without regard to their individual qualities. That includes agricultural producers who are African American, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Hispanic or Pacific Islander. It says the language does not prevent white farmers from also applying to the program, but all three lawsuits argue that the program excludes white farmers and therefore is discriminating against white farmers. And we see Mother Jones reported white farmers got 97% of the AG, the agricultural bailout. And now some are mad that black farmers are getting debt relief. We also see that this is from another website. Nearly all pandemic bailout funds went to white farmers. Nearly all of the billions of dollars in federal farm bailouts to offset the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic went to white farmers, newly revealed Department of Agriculture data shows, right? So I'm just gonna run through this and I'm gonna stop. White farmers received nearly 97% of the $9.2 billion provided by October 2020 through the USDA's Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. So we see that they received 97%, but because we used black, we, specifically us, used black, they fought us for it. Some did trickle to black farmers. It says USDA data shows that white farmers received on average 4 times more than the average black farmer. Using data from USDA's farm census, EWG calculated that the average white farmer received $3,398, whereas the average black farmer received $422. In total, white farmers received $6.7 billion in CFAP payments, and black farmers, and I want you all to pay attention to this, received just $15 million. Remember, all of those other groups were also included in that COVID relief package. But look at how much they received. Latino farmers received $100 million. Compare that to what black farmers received, $15 million. Native American farmers received $76 million. Compare that to the $15 million that black farmers received. And not to mention, there was also, out of that $31 billion, separately, that these Native Americans received for their farmers on top of this. And Asian American farmers received $17.6 million, while we received just $15 million. So the point is that by using race-based policies, we will always be attacked. Using lineage-based policies, which is why we were able to have a Freedmen's Bureau established. And what you are looking at on the screen are all of the many Freedmen's Bureau outposts in this country. We were America's first protected people, but through time, through the literature and through legislature, the term freedmen fell out of use, and the term Negro, Black, and colored people took its place. And from that, we were able to be restricted, as we've just seen in the Farm Bill. And with that, I conclude the presentation.
Mr. Way, for that very compelling presentation. There was also a part that I thought was equally as important point to make, was the connection between Black maternal mortality and infant mortality rates and the decline and disappearance of Freedmen hospitals as well. I thought that was an especially interesting point to make, that you made last time.
Those were in the next slides, but I wanted to respect the time, so I just cut it off right there. But yes, our women especially, and I pulled the North Carolina numbers, and those numbers are drastic. And because of poor hospice care, because of the fact that they closed, 44 Freedmen hospitals that we had that were for our people specifically, with our own doctors and with our own nurses, we became subjected to the racism that goes on in the medical field. So, that's definitely in the presentation, and maybe in the very near future, I'll be able to go a little more in depth on that.
Right, so hopefully we will be engaging you to do a full report that includes Reconstruction history of North Carolina freedmen here as well. And I wanted to also, if I may, just draw the comparison or the correlation between the loss of land among freedmen and the connection to today's food apartheid, that how intricately connected all of the current present-day disparities are correlated and directly connected to our lineage as freedmen, being the descendants of people who were enslaved and then freed, and given this bureau as a source of protection, as a way to reunify with our families, and then how that was taken away, and how we have seen the wealth gap grow from 0.5% when we were emancipated to its present 20-to-1 wealth gap. So with that, I will yield the floor to others who might have questions for Mr. Way.
Mr. Way, this is Chairman Alston, and I really would like to thank you for this very informative presentation. Actually the second one that you've done for us, and I really look forward to a more in-depth conversation on this topic. So having said that, are there any questions?
And Mr. Way, this is Commissioner Hensley. I know you and I have talked a few times since our last subcommittee meeting, and I too want to express and echo the value of what your presentation was for today. And I think it did provide all the other chairmen or commissioners, as well as the public who's present and will hopefully get a chance to listen to the video at some point, a valuable insight as to why the lineage-based approach is critical to our approach for this commission's effort. It is without saying, from my understanding, in terms of your report, that we have no other option that is going to be more viable toward us seeking some type of remedy to the disparities of injustices that we've experienced due to the loss of our status as being freedmen and freed women. And so I just wanted to thank you publicly for your opportunity to present this evening. And as Chairman Alston just indicated, we look forward to you being a part of this process as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Honors. I am honored to be here. Honors.
Mr. Chairman, it's Councilman Holmes. Mr. Way, thank you. And I think each of the council members, commission members here should really pay attention to both the presentations as we get closer to crafting remedies. We should not just think about the impact of these solutions, but we should also think about the potential challenges to these solutions as they are devised. So for us to have the biggest impact, the fastest impact, we need to be deliberate in making sure that these policies are able to overcome any legal challenges that they may have. So thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. There's a lot of information in there that we should consider as we move forward. The limits to what the city is able to do, what legally we are able to do, what fiscally we're able to do. And so all these things will have to be considered in terms of policy. I think also if these policies are going to be put in place, there may be an opportunity for us, if we find that policies extended to the private sector, to be able to have conversations with the private sector about policies that intersected with city policy. And so I think, but we have to be deliberate in crafting these policies, because we will, and we certainly will face legal challenges to them. So, and not to belabor the delivery of these policies to our community, we need to make sure that when these policies leave this commission, that they will survive any challenge that they are brought forth. Thank you.
Oh, honors. And if I can just say real briefly, I believe, and we all believe, which is why we also believe that California adopted the language of American freedmen, based on what Professor Chimorinsky was highlighting, that what we're attempting to accomplish here is race neutral. Remember when I read from Federal Directive 15, it clearly states that these classifications should not be interpreted as being scientific or anthropological in nature. So if it's not based on science or anthropology, that means it's based on politics. So being that race seems to be a flotation device for one group and an anchor for the other, meaning us, right? We have the anchor, then we feel that the language and the status of American freedmen is in fact the correct way to approach this situation and eliminates race from the discussion.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Again, Mr. Way, we thank you for your presentation tonight, and we will be getting in contact with you at a later time.
Thank you all, and I look forward to it.
Great. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, well, again, that was excellent, and I want to just state that after an extraordinary amount of research into this topic, of course, also looking to the precedent that was recently set in California, also with Governor Newsom signing into law a new classification identifying African Americans as descendants, essentially of persons emancipated in America, the language previously presented. But I wanted to, as well as Erwin Chimorinsky, who is a constitutional scholar and has essentially told us that race is a certain challenge, and that is not the way that we should approach this. And so with that, I would like to offer a motion that the One High Point Commission develop its or establish its community of eligibility based on lineage, and that is how we move forward with further discovery around this topic.
I second that. This is Commissioner Hensley. Second that motion.
Okay, it's been properly moved and second. that we utilize lineage-based as we move forward with our research and the end product. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think as we consider lineage-based qualification, I think we also have to make sure that we look at this in the context of time. Lineage-based, we would have to make sure with 39,511 black people in the city of High Point. Each one of them would be eligible to prove their lineage as part of this, of the distribution of whatever resources came from this commission. That's going to take some time. And so it probably will be more time than we have if we were to begin that even today. So I want to make sure that while I think the validity of lineage-based qualifications meets what we need to do, feasibly in terms of executing that, we should consider before moving forward how we would logistically make that happen.
Can I offer a response to that is actually for us to establish the community of eligibility based on lineage, and basically that determines the research and how we approach. Now, does it mean we're dispersing any resources at the end of it? Not necessarily. So let's keep that in mind. It's in phases. So imagine we come to the end and we say, we want to reestablish an Office of Freedmen Affairs, which were the field offices. All those dots you saw were actually called Office of Freedmen Affairs because they were the field offices. So just imagine a scenario. We have successful into the commission. We've decided we're going to do lineage-based. Well, then you go to the Office of Freedmen Affairs, when you get your paperwork together. So in phases, but I see that we make this determination, then do our research, and then once we're done, the policies, but then obviously, like you have a Bureau of Indian Affairs, you have to go and you got to get your paperwork done. So that's how I see it playing out logistically, but.
Right, we're not under a crunch timeline. We're
Right.
not trying
Yeah,
to
in terms of, we don't
identify
need to find everybody before we.
within a year's time, yeah.
If we're taking that approach, then we're looking at an expansion potentially of city departments.
This is
that would
ongoing.
have to be designed, housed, manned, funded by cities, by the city itself. And so that's going to be a much greater task than just saying that we're going to have a Freedmen's Bureau. What would be the teeth? What would be the ability of that bureau to execute? So we would have to consider that. I think the motion is fine, but I think this is going to engender a much broader discussion about the exception that follows.
Precisely, and it should. I mean, it should. This is exactly, we're right on track, so, but we should definitely keep them separate.
This is Chairman Austin, but the bottom line is, we want this effort to be successful.
Right.
And we already know that if we go in another direction, it will not.
Right, we
So,
cannot be black in this situation.
Yeah, so we will do, we already knew that this was going to be a daunting task when we each applied to be on this commission. And we will move as quickly as we can, but we always leave on the table, city, that this may be more than a 12-month program, so we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is Commissioner McMichael, and as we're considering this motion and other motions that'll come, how do we become inclusive of those who have been harmed by Jim Crow, and how do we really not eliminate individuals because their lineage doesn't trace back, but they have still been harmed by the city system?
It'll be the policies that we change. They will be affected within policies, because this is something that has been ongoing for 400. So we count the 250 of enslaved years of free labor and all of that. But we also, have in consideration Jim Crow redlining and today, as in September the 1st, 2022. So as we look at that, we're not excluding anyone, but we're going to our root. A tree has a root. It has a seed, it plants, it roots, and then it grows and it has branches. They're just one of the extended branches. They will receive a benefit because United States and High Point, North Carolina can't continue with the behaviors that they've done on blacks, on freedmen. We're going to change that narrative. We are the ones that can change our own narrative, though, when it comes to who we are and what we're called.
And this is Commissioner Hensley, and as I made an observation in our last subcommittee meeting on the 25th, whereas when I came into the building, I happened to notice the statement that is on the wall. It says, creating the single most livable, safe, and prosperous community in America. And it struck me in a way in which, if that is the motto of this city, and if that is the commitment that the key stakeholders of this city is wanting to live up to, then where it says prosperous community, that automatically suggests to me inclusive of anybody and everybody who lives in the community of High Point. So if the black community is excluded by the redlining, by disenfranchised, by employment, or by incarceration, or those other systemic matters that are impacting the black community, then the motto of creating the single most livable, safe, and prosperous community in America is a
Facade?
sham. So this effort of this commission, and with all due respect to the position of the timeliness of it, I would suggest to all of my fellow brothers and sisters on the commission, let's not be afraid of a timeline or a deadline. Yes, we do have a specified 12-month period, but let's not get so enamored by this 12-month period and lose sight of the significance of what we're doing, because the significance and the importance of what we're doing is going to drive the effort of what our research and our data is going to generate for the community. So I just want people to just mull over that motto, creating the single most livable, safe, and prosperous community in America. If that's what they want to live up to, then we're here to help you.
If we're talking about, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we look at the African diaspora, the American freedman, the American Negro is the most marginalized within the African diaspora here in America. Their wealth levels compared to ours, 72,000 for African and Caribbeans versus 4,000 for American freedmen. And here in High Point, I think we might have 10 people who are not us. I don't know if there's a large Caribbean or African contingency here. I do know in doing canvassing out that people in that community tend to not feel the same way about the past or thinking about the past. They would prefer that we forget about the past and just work harder and keep our heads down. So I think rising tide will lift all boats. If you lift the most marginalized blacks within the black community, everyone will benefit. And as Commissioner Co-Chair said, Alston Wilson, they would benefit. They would get collateral benefit from our uplift, just like most of America has. Whenever we focus on good politics for American freedmen, everyone benefits. Unfortunately, previously, we were using the term black, and now that is expanded, and then it became minority, and we have continuously been bottom casted in programs in which we tried to demonstrate with black farmers. there were several groups listed that received benefits, but they zeroed in on one term only. So it's a matter of, do we want to be successful or no?
This is Commissioner McMichael, and I think that all of these points are important to make for the record so that they're not implied through a motion, but they're detailed and specified so that those who are listening, those who will play it back, and that those who are in the room understand exactly what the intentionality is around the motion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Are you ready for the question?
Yes.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. Motion carries. All right, the last part of our agenda is with finance and compensation. I'll turn this over to Commissioner Singh.
Thank you, Chairman Austin. Good evening, everyone. My name is Commissioner Robert Sims, and I'm here to discuss this evening the proposed budget that the Finance and Compensation Committee has come up with in our meetings over the past month. The committee has been fortunate to meet with committee chairs as well as the chairman to discuss what items and the funding that will be needed for these different budget items. So we've broke it down into two areas. We have contracted services and we have commission community events. For our contracted services, we are proposing to hire a project manager. That project manager will oversee management support, communication management, research, and facilitation support. That project manager, we are forecasting to be $14,000. Our next budget item is going to be legal services. We broke that down at a per hour basis of $100 per hour for 900 hours. So with the legal services, what we're looking for is assistance with content background, provide legal guidance to the commission, as well as constitutional law, civil liberties, and how to frame our final proposal. That final number comes out to $90,000. We also have looked at hiring experts. Those experts would be genealogists, industrial genealogists, economists, and historians. All four of those line items are at $3,000 apiece. And again, those are proposed at $100 per hour at 30 hours. Going to our next set of line items, there was discussion as for documentary services. And this one's going to be broken up into two documentary services. The first one is going to be a line item for video documentation of full commission meetings only. That cost is going to come to a proposed $11,400. And then we also have a documentary services for all activities of the commission to include commission meetings, subcommittee meetings, and community events. That proposed line item will come to $42,000. The last item in our contractor services is going to be commissioner stipends. The commissioner stipends were justified for incentives that will be for time related to research, for meetings, event attendance, travel, or any miscellaneous cost that's not covered directly by the city of High Point. We broke that stipend down to $150 per month, and that will be for each commissioner with a total of $19,500. So the contractor services comes up to $188,900. So we move to our second section, which is for the community events. And in those community events, we have discussed having, of course, the one-day workshop for commissioners. That one-day work session would be a cost of $1,000. The town halls, as we discussed earlier, those would be a series of discussions with the public. That cost comes to $3,000. Along with our story time tour, again, those I think will coincide with the town halls. That also is a price of $3,000. We have T-shirts, which of course everyone knows what T-shirts will generate as far as marketing. That cost comes to $2,000. And then we have flyers that we would pass out, and that costs us $1,000. So with the commission community events, we have a total of $10,000. If you add that with our contracted services of $188,900, that brings us to a total of $198,900. Now, this budget has been proposed based on the remainder of the commission. So these will be monies that we're hoping we can get for the duration of this commission to achieve our goals. This is a proposed budget, and, you know, there is room for discussion. I want to point out with the genealogist, the industrial genealogist, the economist, and the historian, these 30 hours are projected time that will be spent with the research. These numbers can change because we simply don't know how much that's going to take. So we just put this out just as a model for what we're looking at this commission will need as a budget for this commission, for the duration of the commission. So this is going to be presented this evening, September the 1st, 2022, and I open the floor up to any discussions or any questions.
This is Chairman Alston, and having conversation with research and these figures, first, let me thank you for taking on this task and coming up with a worksheet that we can move forward with. So let me first say that. What I would like to do, because there's some more discussion that needs to happen with this, is that we put this in the parking lot.
Yes.
And come together at another point, maybe in the next couple of weeks or so, and just have a call meeting to walk through this again. And maybe at that time, make a determination as to whether we're going to move forward with presenting this to the next level. Okay? So if all are in agreement, we're going to just put this in the parking lot and move from there. Having said that, one of the things that we talked about in our very first meeting is that once a committee is formed and they've completed their task, then that committee is dissolved and the members of that committee rolled into other committees. In attending the meetings of Finance and Compensation, not only were they working on the budget, but they were also delving into some research with the city of High Point. So to that, I would like to make a motion that we dissolve the Finance and Compensation Committee and roll that group into research so that they can continue that leg of what they were working on.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and second. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion carries.
Welcome, Finance. Love to have you here.
So quick.
Also,
Welcome.
I want to put on the table and ask for permission from the commission to take a serious look at bringing in a project manager. You know, this endeavor that we are undertaking is quite task intensive. And each of us sitting here, like many, we have our lives. And as opposed to many of the commissions of the city, we are research-based, meaning that there's a lot of work to be done. I would like to be able to bring someone in that's their job to the commission and get a lot of the legwork done and so forth. So what I'm asking is permission to look further into that, and be able to bring back to you other recommendations.
Question, Commissioner Hensley. Do you think by next month's meeting that will give you enough time to consider the aspects of who that person may be, how to approach that person, and get them on board from your vetting of them to then present to this commission, or do you think you need more time?
Now, I think that if we're gonna have a meeting in a couple of weeks to talk about the budget,
Can we?
I'll just make sure that that's done in that length of time.
Great,
You know, because I would rather bring that person on sooner than later.
great.
'Cause we got a lot of work to do, and we're approaching that 6-month milestone, and there are reports that have to be written and other things. So if given the next couple of weeks, I'll make a presentation at that point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Oh, I was gonna just ask if you could just give us a brief summary of like what you envision this person doing. I'm thinking somebody that, you know, hovers over all of them, just makes everything, sure everything is.
And pulls everything together. You said it simply. To provide management support, communications management,
Yeah.
research, and facilitation support. More specifically, to attend commission-sanctioned meetings, create/compile project reports as determined necessary, data collection and management, survey creation, create stakeholders and subject matter experts database, provide biweekly status reports, and any other duties that the commission needs.
And wasn't that position one of the first line items of the financial and compensation?
Yes.
Commissioner Austin, question, and this may be more of a question pointed towards Mr. Rashford and Dr. Wade. How do they integrate into this with the project manager, potential project manager? Their duties versus the duties you expect the project manager to do. Do you feel like we may have some duplicative help here or work going on here between what they're doing versus what the project manager would do?
I don't foresee that being a duplicate of services, because this person is boots on the ground, not, you know, but
Right.
boots on the
They're
ground, working every day or whatever time we determine for the commission, producing documents, you know, doing a
Connecting
lot of the legwork, you know.
Yeah, like
that
the
we're doing.
administrator, I could see a person like that, like, especially being helpful, like with the community events, like, I can see, yeah, the more you talk about it.
Whereas our facilitators are more keeping us on track.
In our meetings.
Personal counseling, so forth, advising, yeah. So I don't see that as a duplication.
And that project manager will assist us as well in, when we're creating our calendar for our presenters, as well as our people that witnesses testimonies and things like that. They'll be the person to coordinate all that, instead of us trying to do it all.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Sims, for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Report. And again, thank you all for the work that you've done to this point. Those that are listening and those that are visiting with us, you see that this commission is hard at it, to say the least. Not only are we moving forward, but we are also educating ourselves and trying to educate the community as well. You know, one of the conversations we had early on was, how do we get the community involved? Well, you heard it tonight. And my charge to the community is that you support us, that you are present. I envision all these seats filled at some point. So, again, thank you, Commissioners. Okay, were there any parking lot items that we need to cover? I think we covered the one where we talked about the 3-day retreat, and we're gonna do a 1-day session, and that probably was the only one that was, that was out there. All right, at this point, I'll entertain any comments, brief comments
And see if
from
the
any of the
facilitators have
commissioners and from our facilitators.
This is Commissioner Michael. One of the things I do want to say is that on September the 12th, there will be a Public Relations Subcommittee meeting, and we are trying to get more bodies in the seat. So we're slated to talk to media and marketing of the city. So if there are persons that are interested and want to be a part of that subcommittee, please join us, because we really want to support the efforts of not only getting the word out, but starting to relay the message based on what we're doing.
I'd like to say, there is also a community group called One High Point United that is having an event October 1st at the High Point Public Library in collaboration with the Heritage Center, and that should be a really fun family event. You'll be able to basically get the 1, 2, 3s on how to fill out your box for lineage purposes. And that is different and apart from your family story, which can be, challenging for some of us, but just to get those boxes filled so you get to that 1870 census. And I just want to say, I really appreciate the public, the people who came out tonight. It feels so good to see you all here, so thank you so much. And I see some of our elders, and I saw you nodding your head, and I hope that we are living up to your expectations, and that you continue to come out and you call us out, and that when we get to the public comment section in this process, that you do come back and share your stories. I think that we've done a great thing tonight. It was very low key. I almost had my breath held, but lineage-based reparations and restorative policy is the only way to go, and we have done something heroic and historic here tonight. And thank you, Chairman Joe Alston and Co-Chair Alston Wilson. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And Chairman Hensley.
Facilitators, would you?
Yes, just a couple of quick comments, if you all don't mind. Whenever we have worked with groups over the years, groups like this, especially with ones with a formidable task in the way that you all have one, you go through this process of storming, forming, norming, and then performing. And tonight, I get the feeling that you all are in the performing stage. This was a really good meeting, and you really should be proud of yourselves. I love the message you talked about earlier with the talking points when you talked about message discipline. It is important that everybody in this group tells the same story. Everybody in this group always needs to tell the same story. It's like working for an organization, and then all of us have done this at one point in time in our lives, where they have these long missions and visions, and you ask one of the staff people, well, what's your mission? They have no idea what it is. What is a vision? No idea what it is, but this is short, it's succinct, and it gives everyone an opportunity to be on the same page. And I'll close with this. Really love the conversation and the presentations tonight, and I was taking notes. The presenters talked about in addressing a lot of the things that you all need to address, that you should be colorblind, and the first thing that popped in my head was that the government hasn't always been colorblind, so I don't get that. I love the discussion about how you can't fix race-based harm with race-based remedies. if you think about the 13th Amendment, it was a race-based remedy that fixed a race-based harm. So it can work. And finally, saying that you can't fix race-based harm with race-based remedies is like saying you can't fix water-based harm, flood damage with mud and everything with water. You're going to need the water to clean it up. So it can be done.
Thank you.
I'm going to also add to that one of the things that I saw accomplished this evening was something that this commission has talked about for a while, and that is educating the public. The information from the two presenters, as well as the conversation that occurred among this particular board, this particular commission, was enlightening. It was eye-opening to many. There are many who've never heard of the legal of SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, and how it dealt with the issues of race-specific solutions versus race-neutral solutions. This is also something that, again, the theme that I've heard on a recurring basis is, how do we educate the public on these issues? I applaud you and I commend you on how well that's done this evening.
And Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, one other quick thing, and this is to my sister, Dawn. You mentioned earlier about if the tide rises, all boats should rise with the rising tide. That's not necessarily true. You all are dealing with a lot of boats that have been sitting on the bottom of the ocean with holes in them. And if you don't fix those holes, those boats will never rise. So we've got to fix those boats in order to allow them an opportunity to rise.
So let me respond to that, because when it was just a black and white country, yes, the 13th, 14th Amendment, which was written specifically for Black American Negro freedmen, that was all well and good. But as the country brought in more people, and then ultimately people who were poor, there was obviously racial jealousy, and there were targeted policies against this that basically expanded beneficiary groups to minority and all of these other terms in an effort to move us away from the Reconstruction amendments that were written specifically for black people. So yeah, at one point, yes, obviously intuitively race-based, we need race-based fixes, but white supremacy, the establishment has changed it, CYA, and now they say, well, gee, well, now here in the 21st century, you can't fix things based on that. But what they've done in addition is they've created terms like socially disadvantaged, minority, HUB, MWBE, BIPOC, POC, all words of erasure, all meant to expand the beneficiary pool, all having the impact of bottom casting us. So what we're saying is, yes, obviously we will still probably hang on to African American and black, but when we push policy, we have to use a legal status. And that's what we're saying. We're not saying that I'm no longer an American Negro, which is what is on my birth certificate. I'm not any longer African American or FBA or ADOS or whatever I want to call myself. What we're saying is that that's your family story. We're talking about lineage where you can trace a parent back to the 1870 census where they are listed as black, mulatto, or Negro. But then we're saying in today's environment, we can't lead with color. We can't lead with skin tone. It has to be harms-based, lineage-based. Because essentially there has to be, it can't be based on just because you look like us. And that's it. But I understand where you're
We're on the same page.
Okay, are there any other comments? So the last thing I'll say is a book that is making its rounds as far as reparations is concerned is the one that we have up here. And it is From Here to Equality. So I'd like to thank the city for providing each one of the commissioners a copy of this book.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And second.